welcome to The Journal. I'm your host, Samantha Backus. Now, The Journal is a live show where we showcase documentaries created by broadcasting and film students here at Centennial College. We also have some interesting guests and an awesome musical performance.
Thanks, Sam, and I'm Camilla Kwok. Glad you guys can join us. Today we have documentaries about the community surrounding LARPing, some history on the deadly V-bombs used by the Nazis in World War II, a group of people trying to help Syrian refugees, and a story about an artist living on wards. We also have our musical guest, Binesh Hamidian, a metal musician who is going to be playing some guitar for us today. So stay tuned. It's going to be a great show.
Welcome back. Just before we get started, I want to give a shout out to all of the crew on The Journal, the one behind the camera and in front. In addition to providing the content on today's show, The Journal is entirely produced by second-year broadcasting and film students.
That's right. It's really cool to see the creativity of so many people come together to produce this show. And our first story is all about creativity. Do you enjoy fantasy worlds like Game of Thrones or Dungeons & Dragons? This is a story of people who have taken their love of this genre into fields and forests of the real world. LARPing is a phenomenon that has taken off across the globe. Let's take a look into the interesting world of live-action role-playing in A Life in LARP.
LARP stands for live action roleplay. You can imagine it as, if you've ever played Dungeons & Dragons or any kind of role-playing game, it's the same idea, but in real life. So you are the actual character. You are the person doing the fighting, doing the role-playing, the acting. You are that character. So you actually get to physically do the things that you are doing instead of, you know, explaining or rolling dice or playing with a controller or something like that.
Electra Bauer is more than just an avid LARPer. She works for Underworld as a player consultant, where she introduces newcomers to the world and coaches them on etiquette, resources, and rules.
So Underworld is a horror fantasy 18+ LARP based in Toronto, Ontario. It's very unique in the sense that it's not just a basic fantasy LARP. It's a little bit darker than that. A lot of people are drawn to the darker themes that Underworld offers, as opposed to the fun fantasy elves and dwarves and humans getting along and having fun. It's less of a get-along gang game and more of a serious role-play game, which a lot of people really enjoy. It's also very combat-heavy, which a lot of people enjoy as well. So, funny enough, I got into live-action roleplay through my friend, and so the day of, he basically kidnapped me from my house, and I went to game, and it was the best weekend I ever had.
LARP is more than just creating a character and going to game. Players are expected to camp and survive a weekend-long event where they can be attacked at any time. It is a community that is quickly growing in size and popularity, and may very well become an activity that is well known and enjoyed across Canada.
Live-action role-playing has actually been around since the 70s. The first recorded LARP group was called Dagahir, founded in 1977 in Washington, D.C., and is still around today.
Very cool. It looks like a lot of fun. Now, later on in the show, we have a really inspiring story about a man with his passion for rescuing animals and our music performance by alternative rock artist Binesh Hamidian. But first, we move far from fantasy battlefields of LARPing in the real-world battlefields of World War II, where terrifying, dangerous Nazis weapon terrorized cities across Europe.
The V-bombs used against the British in World War II mark a dark chapter in the war. The terrible sound of their approach is still ingrained in the minds of some survivors today. This next doc looks at the history of these deadly weapons of war. This is the robotic bomb. Let's take a look.
A flying bomb. It might not sound like anything to us today, but in 1944 it was a terrifying sight to see. Germany's V-1, the first of the Vengeance superweapons developed in World War II, set out to terrorize the cities of Britain, and terrorize they did.
We didn't first see it. First of all, it was announced, and I think it was Churchill on the radio, saying that these They called them pilotless planes, but a pilotless plane in those days was very scary. And when I first saw it, I can remember it going across the sky with this great big flame. Like they would come, and they were really the deadliest thing that we experienced.
Powered by an early pulse jet engine and guided by radio frequency and gyroscopes, the V-1's pilotless design allowed the Germans to seek vengeance on Britain without risking any more loss of life in their already crippled Luftwaffe. The Germans simply needed to launch the bomb in the direction of its target, and automatic guidance took care of the rest.
I could have lost my own life, and my sister was with me in the Royal Navy. We were going across, and sure enough, this doodlebug, the V-1, was coming across, and it suddenly stopped. We all looked and said, my gosh, it's just overhead. It was 100 yards away from us. Fortunately, the walls saved our lives because it went into the soft earth and made a huge hole, but it sent all the mud and stuff in over the walls, and that it sprayed up, you know. Thank goodness, that's the closest I've been to a doodlebug.
Although effective in terrorizing the population of London, it was ultimately too late for the Germans to win the war with the help of the V-1 and other vengeance weapons. As the Allies began to encircle them on all fronts, many of the weapons developers surrendered to them for fear of retaliation. These engineers, such as Werner von Braun, would go on to develop many more missiles for the Cold War weapons race, proving that the V-1 rocket kick-started something big. And for survivors like Madge, memories of the V-bomb attacks still linger.
That is some scary stuff, and it must have been so terrible always living in fear like that.
Yeah, it makes you appreciate what we have here today in Canada.
For sure, Canada is a great place. People from all over the world come to live here. Sometimes, unfortunately, they're leaving a bad situation in their home country. Taking Syria, for example, a huge number of people have been displaced and are seeking new homes. The woman in our next story is trying to make that transition a little easier for Syrian refugees new to Canada. So here we go. This is Syrian Refugees.
All right, so my name is Kelly Grant, and right now I'm on maternity leave. I'm home with my youngest son, who's 8 months old. I have two other boys who are 3 and 5. When I'm not home on mat leave, I'm a journalist, and I work for the Globe and Mail. I'm a health reporter there. And while I've been off this particular mat leave, I have been spending a fair bit of time working with a group called the Toronto East End Welcome Project that is hoping to sponsor privately a Syrian refugee family, and in the meantime is helping a family who arrived here under the government-assisted refugee program.
The image of a young boy found dead on a beach in Turkey marked the crisis point for Syrian refugees.
This poor little 3-year-old boy named Alan Kurdi, who died trying to escape Syria and was found washed up on a beach in Turkey. There's something so terribly sad and wrong in the world that for no reason other than where he was born, this is how his life ended.
For many people like Kelly Grant, this moment in time served as a catalyst that motivated her to get involved in helping Syrian refugees.
So the family that we're helping now, their names are the Al-Shablis. They've got 4 children who are 11 and younger. So what our group has been doing is helping them get settled in Toronto. Basically, when they arrived here, a settlement agency helped them find an apartment and got them some basic furniture, but beyond that, there really hasn't been a ton of help for them. Another volunteer group has started hooking up groups like ours who are like ready and willing and waiting to help with these families who need support. And so we have started supporting this particular family. So our group has done things like the day they moved into their apartment, we went and bought them groceries and sheets and comforters. We've helped arrange for them to get household items like dishes. We've taken them to charity groups to pick up clothing. We have arranged to get the parents into ESL classes to get the kids registered in school.
Not only is Kelly in charge of the communications chair, but she also runs the blog at TorontoEastEndWelcomeProject.wordpress.com.
So I would say our goal with the blog is to do two things. It's one, to keep people who've been supporting our group informed about what we're doing. The other purpose is we're trying to raise money for the family we eventually hope to sponsor, and then also to help the Al-Shabli family while they're here too. And so having the website is a great way to be able to say to people, hey, like, this is what we're doing. We want you to come to our fundraiser or consider making a donation. And if you want to learn more about who we are and the work we're doing, you can find it on our website. So in any way that we can, we are trying to help make their transition to becoming full-fledged Canadians as smooth as we possibly can.
It honestly is great to see people coming together to help each other. On to the next. Wards Island is a beautiful place that feels almost like another world entirely. Only minutes by ferry from Toronto's harbourfront, Wards Island is a great place for artists of all kinds. To seek inspiration in this next story, we meet painter Lori Dell and explore her art as well as the island.
Okay, can I get everybody?
Wards Island is home to many kinds of musicians, painters, photographers, and eccentric personalities looking to get away from the noisy streets of the mainland, looking to find inspiration and enjoy the beauty of nature. This is the story of one of Wards Island's many artists.
My name is Lori Dell. I'm a painter. I've been an artist for more than 30 years. Well, I painted since before I could speak, so it wasn't a question of whether I would paint. But I did decide to paint full-time when I was in my early teens because it just fits for who I am. It's more than relaxing. As soon as, for me, whether it's here on the island or just going for a walk in the woods, as soon as you step in there as in there's a certain space where you hear the birds, and it's just like something just kind of washes over you and you just go poof. I have predominantly three styles that kind of weave back in and out of what I do. The one constant seems to be that I prefer to work large. It just seems to be part of my personality. I like to paint large faces. It's not so much about figurative or even portraiture so much as humanity. I also love history and archaeology, architecture, so there's a lot of work that is based on time and place. And I also like abstract. Because abstract still kind of weaves into whatever work I do, whether it's realism or not. And there's something about just the pure feeling of color and form that even a black line on a yellow background can speak volumes of a feeling of place. When I first started painting, it wasn't even a question of whether I was inspired to do so. It was my language. It was how I expressed myself, what I was interested in. And like I said, that I was very little. It was before I could speak. Although I always liked music, I liked dance. But I made a decision when I was about 15. I just knew that it was sort of between piano and art kind of suits more the whole of me. It's not like I have favorite pieces. Usually there's, out of each series that I work in, which I do tend to work in groupings, there might be one that kind of sums up that grouping more than others. But the first ones that come to mind, just in general over many years, are the ones that almost paint themselves. I don't tend to sketch or plan too much. I find that's too contrived. But even like this one behind me, I had no plan whatsoever. Not colors, not form. And there's a couple of other paintings that I've done over the years that literally felt like they just created themselves. And I was just the hand that did it. So they're always a surprise to me.
I'm a gallerist,
and a fine art appraiser. I have an online gallery called Wall Fiction. And Wall Fiction is a combination of art on consignment and art by established and emerging artists such as Laurie Dell. Her work is so diverse and unique that she continuously surprises you with what she creates. The show that we just had called Gates and Portals on Wall Fiction was a beautiful show of work that featured architectural structures and places of gathering throughout history. And so when you look at Laurie's work, it doesn't matter if it's a portrait, if it is purely a landscape, or the combination of historical architecture and gathering places or meeting places for people. The level of detail is extraordinary. Her use of color is captivating. And so that's why I chose Laurie's work.
That seems like a really beautiful place to live and peaceful.
Yeah, it seems like the perfect place for an artist. There's so much beauty all around you.
Our next guest is an artist himself who discovered his passion for music at an early age. Here's a live performance of Movement by Binesh Hamidian. That was an awesome performance, and once again, that was Movement by Binish Hamidian. Now let's take some time to learn a little more about the guy behind the guitar. Over to you, Sam.
Thank you, Camilla, and thank you, Binish. That was amazing. How long have you actually been playing?
I got my first guitar in grade 8, so about 6 years.
6 years, and what do you think was the hardest thing for you to learn?
The hardest thing?
Yeah.
Polyrhythmic measures.
Okay.
You want me to explain?
Yes, please.
Polyrhythmic measure is basically you take an odd meter and you fit it into a 4/4 meter. So it's going to repeat itself every like 4 bars.
Okay.
And you have to pretty much keep 2 rhythms at the same time. So for example, you have 2 different rhythms going on at the same time.
And what inspired you to learn something so difficult then?
A lot of different artists actually. What mostly inspired me was hearing this and appreciating how much work went into making these songs. And I just want to be able to do that myself.
So when you say other people, are you talking about artists and musicians?
Yes.
What musician do you think you relate to the most?
I relate to Misha Mansour the most.
Okay.
He started, I guess, his own sort of genre. We call it gent.
Okay.
Because of the sound it makes, gent, gent. You know what I mean?
All right. And he's your favorite artist?
My favorite artist actually is Tosin Abasi.
And why?
From Animals as Leaders. He plays the 8-string guitar. He's very inspirational. Such a talented musician. He plays, there's this technique he has called thumping. He uses all of his fingers.
Oh, right.
Just ba-da-da-da-dum. You know what I mean? And he really inspired me. I got my own 8-string, which unfortunately couldn't be with us today.
Unfortunately.
But yeah, his whole jazz theory, his chord voicing is just beautiful stuff. Really inspired me to do stuff.
All right. Where do you see your music going in the future?
I don't see it going too far. I mean, the kind of music I play is not very popular.
Oh, okay.
But I'm doing it for personal use and for close family and friends who want to listen to my music.
Do you think one day you could be in Toronto's music scene?
I really hope so. I'm going to try my best, I guess. And if I get out there, I get out there. If not, I have a backup plan.
You have a backup plan? What's your backup plan?
I was going to be a professor at a university for astrophysics.
A musical professor. That sounds amazing.
Right.
Well, thank you so much for being on our show today. And back to Camilla.
Thanks, Binish, and thanks to the producers of all those great stories. We hope you enjoyed this episode of The Journal. Remember, you can check out our previous episodes on YouTube, as well as watch the new episodes stream as they happen on our website.
On next week's episode, we look at stories about Toronto Circus School, behind the scenes at the St. Lawrence Market and the TTC, and the difference between coffee beans and pods, and your local bank mission.
But before you go, we have one final performance by Binish Hamidian. I'm Camilla Kwok.
And I'm Samantha Backus.
And thank you for watching
The Journal.